As someone whose dad joined the milk club when he was young, in other words, my dad left around when I was 4 or something, you could say that I'm someone who might struggle more to find a sense of identity in terms of masculinity, which is my gender. I am a cis man. Pronounce he or him to be quite specific. So I am very much into the masculinity identity. And I make a very important definition of this because I will try to be more scientific with this video and not just go into the superficial words of like, this is a man, this is not a man, or whatever. So since we're having a serious, deep conversation here, whenever I'm using a term, I will try to be as specific as possible, and I will also try to be respectful of anything that could sound triggering or could be controversial or complicated to describe. So again, we're having a serious conversation here. Good? Awesome. So I have my notes here, so if you see me looking down here for too long, it's because I'm like revising what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the question of this video is, what is a good man? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because when I was growing up, as someone whose father joined the milk club, I struggled to understand whether that was a good behavior or a bad behavior. As dumb as it sounds now, I mean, when you're a child, it's kind of hard to really know what is a good thing or a bad thing. You learn by replicating those who came before you, and your parents are usually the first person that you would emulate behaviors from. So having an absent dad and my mom basically doing both, being a mom and a dad, I always had this struggle of, am I being too feminine? Am I being too masculine? Am I being too sensitive or too insensitive? What exactly is the right amount of balance that I should have in my life in each of these different categories? As I was growing up, I had, let's say, multiple influences or multiple sources of information where I could learn on how to be a good man. And again, this good man label, I will slowly develop it through the video, so don't jump into a conclusion right now. Okay, so the first source that I had was music. More specifically, two sources. Linkin Park, which is my favorite band, and hip-hop. God damn it. Hip-hop, more specifically conscious rap. So in hip-hop, you always hear the predominant message of get as much sex as you can, be as wealthy as you can, and be as violent as you can. And the reason why this is a big part of the culture is because when it started in New York, I don't remember exactly if it was Brooklyn, Queens. I know there's a particular building where it all started. My hip-hop history sometimes fails me. But in its inception, hip-hop was a genre of people who were struggling, and they were just looking for a way to express themselves. And this form of expression was not always with the mindset of influencing culture. It was more of like, hey, this is what I am thinking right now, this is what you should be thinking about. Very simple. 1 to the 2 to the 3 and 4, let's go and dance on the floor. 5 to the 6 to the 7 and 8, today I would like to eat some cake. Like, it was very fun and very playful, let's say. But slowly, there were certain elements of the real world that started to affect this artistic world, such as, for example, gang violence or the domestic dynamics of that time, where women had less autonomy and men were more, I don't want to say dominant, because that's not really the word I'm looking for. I want to say that men had perhaps a lesser interest in the woman's point of view or journey, and as a society, that was sort of accepted. And we have to understand that historical time, which was not so long ago, but still existed, because if we don't see those contextual facts, it's kind of hard to understand how we got to this point. So hip-hop started as a musical genre where people were having fun, expressing what their lives were, and they were not putting so much effort into what they were saying at first. Obviously, over time, there were different subcategories, and one of these subcategories is conscious rap, which is the one that I'm more familiar with and the one that I prefer to hear the most. That doesn't mean I can't enjoy Drake or whatever. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, you are what you listen to. So if you listen to too much Drake, you might be surprised to see that your behavior might start to emulate Drake. And in my case, I always had a knack for words and for puzzles and things that would make me think. So naturally, conscious rap, being a lyrical puzzle, made the most sense to me. It's kind of funny because even though I had an interest for conscious rap, one of my favorite rappers in the beginning was Eminem, which is not precisely a conscious rapper, but his use of words was more intellectual than the average because it was basically pun after pun after pun and multi-syllabic structures, and that's kind of what got me into hip-hop properly, let's say. The interesting way of using words and creating things that would make people laugh or cry or just get some sort of emotion out of them. Whether that was a good emotion or a positive reaction or a negative reaction, that's what I would learn over time. But at first, it was all fun and games and trying to learn the rhymes and so on. Within this, I learned two things. I learned the values of sex, money, and violence from the general hip-hop, and in the, let's say, filtered version from conscious rap, I would later learn that although these things are part of life, like sex is part of life, money is part of life, and one way or another, being assertive as opposed to violent is a part of life. Those are, let's say, matured versions of that original thought, but they're still part of the culture. Like in hip-hop, if you're not assertive with what you say, you're not seen as authentic or you're not seen as a rapper. Rappers are always perceived as these people who are like very sure of themselves and they get whatever they want, and they are seen as this like icons, let's say. And that perception of rappers have changed drastically in the last years. I think that back in the day, if you were not affiliated to the street life, or if you were not carrying a gun, if you wouldn't talk about sex, money, violence in a way that appealed to this demographic, then it would be seen as something not real. You would not be real if you were not talking about the realities of the streets, because that's what the majority of people who listened to hip-hop at that time were related to. But over time, that slowly softened, and now we have gotten to a point where there are people like Dualcore who can make raps about coding, which has probably not so much to do with the street life as, well, pretty much anything. So, yeah. The hip-hop has had this evolution, let's say, and masculinity within hip-hop has changed. We started with, this idea of the gangster rapper, or even the backpack rapper, when Kanye was bringing that change among a lot of other rappers, obviously. But now we have gotten to a point where anyone can be a rapper. And when I say anyone, I mean that people who are not cis males can be rappers, for example. You can have female rappers, you can have trans rappers, you can have non-binary rappers, you can have people from different ethnicities being rappers. So it's like this genre opened up, and it also embraced a lot of different cultures. But still, this predominant message was kind of exported globally. So now people from different parts of the world who had different cultures now are embracing this ancestral values of sex, money, and violence in their own way. Even in this example of Dualcore, they have a song which is called Hack All the Things. And sure, they're not glorifying sex, but they're definitely glorifying the violence of hacking into someone or like hacking into NASA or things like that, which is obviously all fun and games because, like, yes, hackers can do that, but the idea of this artistic type of music is just to show off the capacity of what hackers can actually do. It's not just like back in the day where hackers were seen as like random people sitting behind a computer. Like now it's more like watchdogs, where people visualize hacking as something that anybody can do at any point, and whoever knows how to program, they're armed with a sort of mental weapon. But again, all these things go back to violence in some form, whether it is assertiveness, or whether it is the power of programming, or whether it is having money to pay for anything. All these things go back to the same three pillars of sex, money, and violence. In this analysis that I'm doing, which is very very specific. So sex, money, violence, values of hip hop, among other things, but I'm focusing on this one for this moment. And then you have bands like Linkin Park, which show how to be respectful with the fans and with music, and how to live a life controversy free, or for the most part controversy free. So those two things really impacted me, because on one side you had rappers that were completely outrageous, and then you had rappers that were very intellectual and very non-controversial. You had people like your Nas and your Jay-Z, and later on your J. Cole and your Kendrick Lamar, but you also had people who were just constantly on the news saying things or doing stuff or whatever just to get attention, but not really putting any effort into their music. And that to me really started to give me a sort of compass on how to do things. Like, should I be more into the controversy and getting attention and doing all these things, or should I be more respectful and try to find my own way of interpreting sex, money, and violence? The reason why I keep bringing these three things is because I feel that these three categories sort of serve as a compass for what masculinity can be. Because in sex, you could be someone who's very understanding and trying to make things work with the other person in a way that both people feel comfortable and consensual and the whole thing. Or you could just be an asshole and you could do whatever you want and not care about the other person. And once you have a child, you go, like my dad. So expect a lot of dad jokes like that. That's kind of my thing. So yeah, sex, for example, shows you this possibility of either you are consensual and understanding, or you are dismissive and abusive. That's one way of measuring, like, in which side of the spectrum you could fall. When it comes to money, you could think of it as, I am going to make money so I can be financially stable and I can sustain a family, friends, etc., pursue my goals, grow as a person. Or you can think of it as soon as I make money, I'm going to spend it, and I'm going to be very impulsive with money, and I just want to like buy a bunch of like material stuff and not really take care of my health. And a very selfish way of handling money, or a very short-sighted, impulsive way of handling money, and then a very careful and you could add a little bit of stoicism to it, like learning that material wealth is not equal to the value of a person, that no matter your net worth, what matters is your, I don't want to say net worth because that sounds like a pitch for a crypto scam, but what matters are the people in your life, and money is just a medium to get things done, let's say, as opposed to perceiving money as the epitome of humanity, and if you have money then you are valuable, if you don't have money you're nothing. That thing of like, how much do you value money? Do you value money over your loved ones? Or do you value money as a sort of medium to get things done? So we have sex, then we have money, and then the last one, which would be violence, is, are you assertive and assertive when needed, but also flexible to understand other people's points of view? Or do you only care about your own point of view and you will brute force through life regardless of what people think? So that's also a tricky question, because, for example, in the case of businesses, sometimes you do need to stop caring about other people to get things done. But is that ethically correct? Is that the right way that humanity should do things? Is that the best that we can do as humanity to push things forward through sheer brute force, not caring about the environment, not caring about employees, not caring about your own health, like completely disregarding everything just to make some money? Is that the right way of doing things, or is there another way to do things? I'm not here to judge and say what is good or what is bad, even though the main question is what is a good man. But it's more of like deconstructing, not understanding, because you can't understand something you can't see. But if we deconstruct these three pillars of sex, money, and violence, and then we use them as a sort of compass for what a man could be, that's where we can start to see how this label of a good man can happen. So for some people, a good man is going to be the things that I'm describing here. So dismissive or dominant in sex and not caring about the other person. So let's just say non-consensual. Then somebody who values money over everything. So they prefer material wealth over, mental well-being, health, having people in their life that care about them. And somebody who prefers to brute force things through life and get things done by any means necessary, even if that means hurting others, rather than being assertive and flexible. So when I describe these things, you probably have a lot of characters in your mind that come up. I could mention people from hip-hop, or I could mention people from gaming, from books, from films, from social media. All these different places have different archetypes or role models or people who perfectly would fit into this model. So when I'm describing this side, we are talking about men who are self-centered. And just to counter that, I'm going to say that the men on the other side are going to be men who are nature-centered. So what this means is kind of, again, going back to the Stoic philosophy of being in alignment with nature is what normally is ethical, because nature tends to do things in a way that we perceive as ethical or something along those lines. So self-centered, nature-centered. And you can obviously extrapolate and see, well, okay, men are not only in this category, they're not only aware of their own needs, but they're also aware of the needs of their families, of their friends, of family, not like my dad. And they're also aware of the nature around them, the society around them, the planet around them, basically. So, self-centered and nature-centered. Why is this distinction important? And this is where I go to my second point. So, you have, in social media nowadays, we tend to tribalize or polarize whenever possible. It is either a fault of the algorithms and the way that social media works, where the more that you bring into attention something, the more likely it is to, at the end of the day, make money, because it's going to get more ad revenue, it's going to have more eyeballs on it, so more people are likely to care, which leads to people investing more time and energy and eventually money on that thing. And sadly, things that are negative for now are the things that are more, they get more attention on social media. Also, because probably the people who are doing good or who are feeling good, they're not going to engage with that content. And when you feel good, maybe you're just focused on your, family, friends, your own goals, and not so much on engaging on these platforms. So perceptually, it seems that in social media, we tend to gravitate as a collective towards the negative stuff, and we tend to polarize whenever possible. And obviously, there probably are actors behind the scenes which push these narratives. And I'm not talking about some like Illuminati elite or whatever. I'm telling you basic things such as the companies that create this social media platforms, they sometimes benefit or inhibit certain behaviors, certain tendencies, and so on, for either their own benefit or the benefit of their community. Regardless of why these things happen, perceptually it seems that negativity seems to be rewarded in a way, because it gets more attention, it gets more money, so therefore it somehow gets amplified. Whether because the negative people rally and make that get amplified, or because by accident the algorithms enable this type of behavior, the behavior. So now, why am I talking about social media and behavior and masculinity and all this crap? I'm talking about this because I've noticed in the last years, ever since the pandemic hit, I think, there has been a sort of polarization about what a man should be. And because of this lack of masculinity guidance, let's say, there have been different actors that have sort of swooped in and tried to give men an explanation. Whether that explanation is right or wrong, that's up to each person to decide. But when it comes to these categories that I gave before, the self-centered and the nature-centered, it seems that the self-centered category of men are more predominant in this field. In other words, the opinion leaders who are currently guiding the masculinity conversation are, it seems, more towards the self-centered aspect of this binary categories that I'm giving. So in the spectrum of self-centeredness, the opinion leaders seem to be promoting that sex shouldn't be consensual, for example, that you get whatever you want and don't care about your partner. Or that, for example, it's more important to get material wealth than anything else in your life, so make money by any means necessary. And if it means scamming people or doing things that are not aligned with your values, do it, because money is important. And yes, it is important, but there are different ways on how to describe this. And the third one, which is violence, it's either glorifying violence and saying like, well, like if somebody says something to you, you just punch them in the face, or things like, well, you know, I am a man and I'm going to stick by my opinion, and whoever doesn't agree with it, I just block them out and just keep like living this echo chamber of listening to myself only. And sure, a healthy amount of that is necessary in everyone's life, regardless of gender or sexual identity. But the thing is that this self-centered category has amplified other behaviors. What behaviors, you may be asking? Well, not to brag, well, I can't really brag because it's not a big deal, but in uni, I had to write an essay about media effects. And when I was asked to do this, there was a certain character who was predominantly guiding this self-centered masculinity conversation, which I researched about, among other people in that time. And the thing that I noticed is that there was an actual increase in violence in terms of masculinity generated violence in the last years because of this type of speech. There's something called the manosphere, which is basically all these different sort of masculinity oriented groups that are on the internet. And I'm not talking just about your typical influencers or masculinity gurus, but I'm telling you groups like incels, or groups like people who are part of the men's rights group, I think, among all these other groups which are in this sort of sphere. Not only has violence increased because of this type of narrative, but also this sense of, I don't want to say patriarchy because then I start getting into this shady debates, but let's say for the sake of argument that the systems that enable patriarchy, in other words, that the system benefits men over others, say women or people of other identities, that has been sort of reinforced by certain behaviors or certain words, etc. This is obviously perceptual because in reality, thanks to movements like feminism, there have been improvements in certain areas. Obviously, we're not at a point where we can say that things are perfect because there's still a lot of imbalances in many different fields. But the perception that certain patriarchal elements in media or social media more specifically, or the internet, because that's basically where the manosphere mostly acts, do seem to have been heightened. And also, paradoxically, this group of men, again, the self-centered ones, are looking for ways to improve in these areas, or so they say, they also seem to inadvertently isolate themselves from other possibilities because they put themselves in a position where they believe that their beliefs are so important that they're willing to take radical and extreme steps to remove themselves from other things. So an increase in violence, an increase in patriarchal elements in certain instances, and an increase in loneliness in this group of men. Those are the things that I noticed in that time. Obviously, I'm just like a normal person just doing research and then seeing what other people say. It was not peer-reviewed by a million of people, so I'm just telling you what I found, and I obviously probably made mistakes. But my point here is that from the research that other people made, that I saw, that was actually peer-reviewed, these things are actually happening. And you don't really have to look that far. Just look at the internet and look up for any masculinity video, and what do you see? You see men who are increasingly more violent in their narratives, in their way of expressing themselves, and increasingly taking more actions like domestic abuse or going on protests and then things getting out of hand, or harassment online against people that they feel are threatening them. Yeah, these things happen, and at the same time, while they're expressing this type of anger, they're also expressing a sense of loneliness. And they're in this self-centered category. I would like to distinguish two things. There are the men who are there because they truly believe that and they want to push that narrative, and then there are the men who ended up there because they were looking for a role model of what a man should be, and that was what was available. So look how, as I'm describing this, you start to see how there's a sort of chronology to it. And then we reach a point now where we have to decide what are we going to do with this. So right now we're starting a new year, and every new year has different challenges. Last year was very challenging. I think that ever since the pandemic, life has been pretty challenging. And in challenging times, people look for guidance. They look for people that can give them hope, people that can give them a sense of meaning. In the case of men, when we are not finding meaning in competitions such as a war or business or job, work basically, or we're not finding purpose in family, because let's say that we're not financially needed anymore, or we are not the ones who have all the capacities to get things done. Like when we start to see ourselves as people with less purpose or with no purpose at some point, that kind of kills our vibe, and that's the moment when you reach this neutral point of what do I do now? And when you ask a question and you're faced with this manosphere that has for now a sort of monopoly on what a man should be, in this self-centered respect, that's when you see a lot of men who might not fully agree with what these characters in this self-centered category mention, but you just fall there because that's all that there is. So I do understand a lot of kids, for example, who are growing up and they gravitate towards this type of characters because they want to feel a sense of purpose. They want to feel that they are needed in society. They want to feel that their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations are equally valid to everyone else's. And since we have been consistently sort of telling men like, hey, like don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, now I feel, my opinion, I feel that we need to find another way of doing that. Or yes, you put limits to the things that are wrong, that's perfectly fine, but you also have to open doors for things that are allowed and for things that should be encouraged, that certain masculine values and certain masculinity archetypes should be encouraged. Because if not, if you're constantly telling people what not to do, and they are only given this self-centered option, you're just mass-producing more people who are going to be either more violent or enhance patriarchal elements, or they're going to feel lonely. And that loneliness can lead to either more violence or suicide, or criminal activity, or more negative things in society. So I've spoken a lot about self-centeredness in this particular case, and all the negative connotations that you can think of for this side. Now I want to take a pause from this self-centeredness and focus on the nature-centered one. As I said in the beginning, I had examples such as Linkin Park, where all the members of the band were pretty much stable dudes, even if they were a little bit edgy in the beginning. And to this day, they have always remained a respectful group. Even after Chester's passing, everything that they have done is still respectful. From the way that they treated his legacy, from the way they treat themselves, the way that they treat their families. That is an example that self-centeredness is not the only example that is out there. And what if this group of men, the self-centered ones, are, let's say, the isolated men, then what would this nature-centered men look like and strive for, and what would they be called? So if the self-centered are the isolated, I propose that the nature-centered ones are the integrated men. And the reason why I say the word integrate is because just as in feminism, the goal was to find a way to integrate women into society so that they would be able to also have the same opportunities, or in the civil rights movement when black people were integrated into different positions, and many examples where people who were a minority or that were left out for whatever reason were integrated into society. I feel that, ironically, now it has come a time where men have to somehow be reintegrated into society. Not in the way that they were before, which was perhaps more of a patriarchal system, or where they would benefit more than other people or whatever, but finding a way where men can fit into society with purpose, and that the values that are positive or that are helpful or healthy for men should be embraced and should be respected. Because if we do that, then we decrease the violence, we decrease the patriarchal elements, and we decrease the loneliness in men. And if we do that, well, there are also benefits. Not just this decrease, but it would also have an increase in the compassion and understanding that men could have. Or it could also help with the movements that promote equality. So if we're looking for equality in other groups and men feel left out, once they feel what equality feels like, then they're maybe a little bit more likely to understand these other groups and not oppose them so much. And at the same time, the opposite of loneliness, which leads to suicide, is belongingness. I don't know if that's the right word, but a sense of belonging. And if men have a sense of belonging, then they would participate in the community, as opposed to antagonize it, as opposed to anarchism, as opposed to all these groups that are constantly on the fringe of society, fighting back against a system that seems impossible to defeat. If they are able to take part into that system and figure out a way to improve it from the inside, then they might feel that things are better. We wouldn't feel so hopeless as a society if we would just come together and work things through. But in order to do that, we individually have to get over our own problems. And in this particular case that I'm describing, with this collective of self-centered and nature-centered men, we do need to find ways to take away that isolation and integrate them. And those are not my words. I'm not here making all this shit up. I read studies and papers that described how when there are extremist groups of men who are actually violent, I'm not telling you the ones who are trolling you on your DMs, I'm telling you men who pick up a gun and do a mass shooting and then kill themselves. That type of men, if you reintegrate them early, that type of behavior decreases or disappears completely. So that's why it's essential that we take into consideration these things, that we decrease the hate towards men, that we decrease the, hey, like, being a man is a piece of shit, and we increase the, hey, dude, what's up? Like, what do you feel? What do you want to do? What are your dreams? What do you want to achieve? And take away all these self-centered values and start to strive for more nature-centered values. Instead of seeing sex as something that, like, oh, I'm gonna get as many bitches as I can, why can't we just say, like, hey, I want to have a healthy relationship with a partner that I can be committed to, if that's what you want. If you don't want monogamy or you want something else, whatever it is, find what's good for you, but just stay consensual. I think that that shouldn't be such a bad thing to promote. And promoting things as, hey, you can make as much money as you want, but remember that money's not the end. That money's just a medium to get things done. And instead of promoting, like, hey, if you see the ops in the street, you're gonna shoot them, instead of keep engaging in this sort of gang mentality that was, let's say, influenced by hip-hop or different other cultural elements, why don't we try to find peace and understanding and try to decrease violence? And understand that violence is a part of life. Like, yes, like, every time that we're doing something, we're taking something from someone else. Every time that I'm assertive and I choose to take a step forward, maybe somebody who was less assertive had to take a step back. But to understand how to do those things in a way that's measurable, measured, and balanced, that I think is an important thing that we should be promoting. So what do I want to conclude with this very absurd rant? I think that we as a society struggle a lot to be kind in general and to communicate. I feel that humans suck at communication and they suck at being kind. And that's the reason why religion exists. Because religions force people to be kind. Because you have a higher purpose to achieve. No matter your gender, where you come from or whatever, religions and philosophy to an extent give you that sense of meaning and that sense of understanding and compassion. Other things that give that sense of compassion is family. So once a man becomes a father, that becomes a different thing, usually, except on the case of my dad. But these things that promote this sort of compassion and communication are they're still there, but they are covered by the noise that, for example, polarizing conflicts create. And I'm not talking just about wars, but I'm talking about political conflicts or social conflicts, or even small conflicts like, oh, I don't talk to you because you did this to me, or I don't talk to anyone at work because they're all bad, or whatever it is. But we're constantly in the state of, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to listen to you, I want to be by my own. And what I'm proposing is that we have a little bit more kindness and understanding with each other, regardless of who they are, regardless of which gender they have, regardless of if they like something or not. If we try to be more compassionate and understanding, and we start these conversations, I think that one day we could be in a society where men are not the violent ones. There's no need for anyone to be the violent one. There's no need for anyone to be too much of this or too much of that. And we can focus on actual problems. Like, how the hell are we going to make this planet better? How are we going to make, how are we going to feed the children? How are we going to take care of the, things that actually involve all of us, not just a particular group? Because I feel that our needs as a society could be easily satisfied if we all just work together and we stop fighting each other so much. But in order to do that, I can't speak for women or for non-binary or for other groups, but I can speak for men because I am a man. So as a man, what I'm saying to you, dear man or dear person who's watching, stop isolating, start integrating. That's all. Give people a chance. Try to not polarize so much. And if you feel identified with a self-centered group and you feel that that's the right way for you, I would just ask you to consider the other possibility. To just try to, be more nature-centered for 1 hour and just see if it changes the way that you perceive things. Maybe you're right now at a point in your life where this self-centeredness is the thing that's pushing you forward, and obviously letting go of something that's giving you purpose is absurd because that's the thing that's moving you. But what I'm proposing is that you're not letting go of self-centeredness. You are improving and leveling up to what the next stage of that would be. Because yes, all the people who are nature-centered are also self-centered. Like, do you think I'm not thinking about making money and all the other things? Like, of course I'm thinking about that. But to think about that in such a short-sighted, impulsive way would be not sustainable. And in my personal opinion, it would not be the most ethical thing. Because I am given a certain set of benefits and challenges in life, and if I can make the world a better place through integrating with these other things around me, just like nature does, and again I go back to Stoicism, then why not? Why shouldn't I strive to be happy and make those around me happy? Why should I strive to just fuck everyone around and not give a shit about things around me? That doesn't make sense to me. The rational thing for me, if I want to coexist in a world where people let me coexist, is to be the friendly one first, to be the kind one, to be the one that actually cares. Because if I care, I show the other person that there is a possibility. But if I don't care, then I'm not giving the other person hope either. So if you're someone who's self-centered, you see this as a progression to something better. And trust me, when you're nature-centered, there's more purpose than there will ever be within the boundaries of your own body. There is so much out there to fight for. And if you only think about yourself, you're also going to only be by yourself. But if you integrate and see that there are things out there that are worth your time, and that listening to others is not going to kill you, and expressing your emotions is not going to kill you, and just the joy and the peace that you can feel, if you just stop fighting everything so much and start to see that the world is not against you, it's for you, then maybe you can live a happy life and you would not feel so lonely. And who knows, maybe you would get a partner who would make you feel happy, and maybe you would feel that the world is not controlled by an elite that's trying to destroy your life or something. It's just the planet, and the planet is just nature, and nature is just unfair, and that's it. No animal is complaining about being a prey or a predator. They are just in their cycles and their balances. And so are we. We are just a species that is living on a rock in the middle of an endless space that for some reason decided to give birth to an intellectual species that seems to destroy everything around it. But that's a conversation for a different video. My point is, if you are feeling that you're lonely, or if you're feeling that you're becoming increasingly violent and you are thinking of things that you shouldn't be thinking, or that you are enabling certain things in the world that you don't agree with, but you seem to not find a different option, then I just tell you, like, hey, have one of those tough conversations with someone you care about that listens to you and understands. And if you don't find that, you can start in therapy. And if you don't find that, then just consume content that is different. So I always start with the basics. I was trying to say it in German. The most basic of all things that I think men should do is just to meditate. Why does it sound so plain and so boring? Because it is. Like, you sit down, you breathe, you focus on your breath. That's all. But the reason why it works is because it's gonna sound stupid, but even if you come from a self-centered background and you're literally doing an exercise that makes you focus on yourself, when you start to actually put attention on you and your body and your mind, you start to see that there are certain reasons why you're pursuing these things. It's not that you are being self-centered. Ironically, it's because you're not really seeing who you are and you're chasing things that are not for you. And when you start to see that in yourself and you start to calm down and you start to deconstruct the person that you thought you were and you start to see the person you really are, then that helps. But maybe meditation is not for you. Maybe you just have to join a gym or join a football club, or maybe you need to practice a religion. Maybe you need to... There's got to be something that gives you a step forward into the path of being a happy, integrated man. But that's not up for me to decide. I'm only here just gently pushing you in one direction, but it's up to you, buddy. I can't do the work for you. Nobody can. You can't expect society to do that for you. You can't expect your parents or your family or your friends to do that for you. It's just on you. And again, I go back to my case. Like, my dad left me when I was a kid. My male role models in my family were not really the ones that I wanted to be. So it was up to me to figure out what exactly do I want to be. So what is a good man? I don't really know. I just know that there are certain things that we should not strive for, and there are certain things that we should strive for. And in that spectrum of self-centeredness and nature-centeredness, that's where we find what a good man is for ourselves. And in my case, maybe I'm more towards the nature-centered, and maybe that helps me. But maybe for you, you have to go through different stages until you reach a place where you're happy. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I just read some stuff on the internet, and I thought it was funny to make a video about it. So, with that being said, in all seriousness, I repeat it once again so you don't forget. If you feel isolated by whatever of the things that I've said today, then maybe it's time for you to start integrating. And if you don't know where to start, just go with the basics. Get a job. Get an education. Find a community that you can bond with, or whether it's gaming, a book club, some sort of media club, some sort of physical activity, volunteering, whatever. And in terms of personal peace, I highly suggest meditation, because that's the thing that, for me, actually made me understand what was wrong inside and how I could become a better person. That's all from my side. One last thing that I could add to that would be to maybe study Stoicism. I feel that Stoicism, whether it's Seneca, or more specifically, if you want wealth, money, power, all that shit, read Marcus Aurelius. I think that's if you want to think of a good man who will handle his shit, I think that's the best one that you can find to start with. Or you can watch Avatar: The Last Airbender and hang out with Uncle Iroh. Those are two timeless examples that I think will always be there till the end of the universe. Anyways, I'm ranting too much. I hope that I didn't trigger anyone. If I did trigger you, I'm sorry. I was trying to be as respectful as possible. If something did trigger you, do introspect about it, or you can even like rant about it in the comments. I don't care. But do think about, why does that trigger you? If I said something like, oh, this is not right, or this is wrong, or whatever, or this is right, and it made you feel something, maybe that's your place to start. I really don't know. I'm just throwing here every single resource that I've ever used to answer this question for myself, so that hopefully someone else can learn from it. And I know that the person that's going to learn from this is not going to be someone like me. It's not going to be someone who had my life. It's going to be someone with a completely different context. So you will figure it out on your own. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a scary thing. That is just a thing. You can attach any emotion you want to it, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. You are responsible for your life. Not your parents, not those who betrayed you, no one else. And if you don't take the responsibility, someone else will. And that someone else could be someone who's not thinking about your best interest, or who's going to manipulate you. Don't let these people tell you who you should be or what you should not be. Figure it out on your own. Because deep down, you know who you are. And you know that there are certain things that you're not good at right now, and there are certain things you might be great at, but the humility is not to downplay your strengths or to heighten your weaknesses. Humility is to understand that even if you have weaknesses, you will be a strong person when needed. And even if you have strengths, you will have moments of weaknesses. And in those moments, just remember, you are just human. And sometimes things are not going to work out, and life is unfair, but it's going to be okay. Because you are worth it. And you are the only person who's going to make it through your own life. Okay, enough bullshit. Come on, get up and do something, okay? Let's go. Oh, and don't forget, Semper Nobilis, Semper Indicum. I'll explain that tomorrow, not tomorrow, next week, so don't worry. Everything's gonna be fine. Take care.